Alright, hello people, I'm the Dude, and this is going to be a rant about Age of Wonders. In this case, Age of Wonders Shadow Magic. Age of Wonders 3 is coming out, which is going to kick ass, hopefully. There's a little blurb about it. I love the series for the most part. Shadow Magic was definitely my favorite. They haven't made a game in the series in I don't even know how long. Really long time. When I'm ranting about the video, I'm going to be using this website as a visual aid, I guess. Whatever the hell you want to call it. Age of Wonders 2 Heaven is the name of the website. Lots of good information. I think I'll start with the units, because that's the easiest place to start. There are good ones, neutral, and evil. They actually didn't break it into very evil and very good, even though they should have. There's a step up from this, which is very good, and then there's a step down from evil, which is very evil. But, you know, whatever. The evil don't like the good, for the most part. The evil obviously do not like the very good, and vice versa. Neutral don't even like the very good and the very evil. Pretty much if you're 2 steps away on the alignment, they hate each other. If you're 1 step away, they get along fairly well. So that's how the alignments work. Let's go ahead and start with Archons, because they're the first one on the list. For the stats, attack, defense, health, damage, resist, and movement should all be pretty obvious. These are the different abilities that they get down here. Their name, how much gold it costs to create them. The upkeep is actually fairly important. Upkeep determines whether or not it's useful to use a unit or not. Once they get some EXP, they level up to silver medal, and then when they get some more EXP, they level up to gold. Gives them some base stats, and sometimes some new abilities. Just depends. I figure if I go over all this, when I start up the LP again, I've got about 18 episodes done. I'm about to start it up again, either later today or tomorrow. People will be more informed about what's going on. It's a fairly confusing game because, it's really old. 2, the interface is pretty convoluted, and 3, there's a lot of facets to it. A lot of components. So, yeah. Plus, I wanted to rant about it because it's one of my favorite strategy games of all time. If not my favorite. It may very well be my favorite. It's really, really good. But anyways, starting with level 1 units, the levels go from 1 to 4, 4 being the ultimate units, 3 being the ones that are going to make up your army later in the game. A couple of level 2 units are worth keeping, and very few of the level 1 ones, level 1 units are worth keeping, because most of them are crap. Militia, crap. Legionnaire, pretty much crap. He has throw spear, which means he's deceptively tough. Not tough. Deceptively strong for 1 hit per battle. Because once he throws the spear, he didn't get another one. He only has 1, sadly. He didn't think ahead, I guess. And then you'd think since he's only got 1 spear in his hand, that would be the one he threw, and then he wouldn't be able to do melee attacks either. But it doesn't work that way. But yeah, he gets one spear throw with good attack and good damage per fight, and then he has to go back to using his regular stats. His base stats are 7 attack, 5 damage. I think throw spear is, I want to say 15 attack and 8 damage, I believe. Let's see. Yes, abilities, combat abilities, throw spear. Okay, I was a little bit off. It's 14 attack, 7 damage. Still, that's a far cry, far and away better than his base stats at 7.5. So, he's got double the attack for 1 move, which is pretty good for a level 1 unit. Archers, they really need marksmanship to do anything other than fight other level 1 units. I mean, even to fight level 2 units reliably, they need marksmanship, and they always have to level up to get it for the most part. Every point of marksmanship gives them 1 more attack and 1 more damage for their archery. It's kind of confusing. The attack and damage stats you see here for all the units are their melee stats. If they have a ranged ability, which is what this archer is about, archery, the stats are separate. I'll go ahead and show you that real quick. There we go. Attack 8, damage 4. So his attack and damage stats for archery are completely different than what is listed here. With marksmanship, he gets 1 more damage and 1 more attack per marksmanship. So once he gets to 2, it would go from 8 attack, 4 damage to 10 attack and 6 damage. That would allow him to fight level 2 units. That's roundabout where their defensive stats are going to be. He's still not going to be able to dent level 3, and he won't even be able to scratch level 4 units. So archers, for the most part, are pretty crap. There are exceptions in the game, but for the most part, they're garbage. Going over the level 1 abilities real quickly. He gets Holy Strike. It's an elemental strike. On top of his regular damage, in this case 5, he gets 50% more as elemental damage, in this case Holy. Elemental strikes are really, really good for anyone who does melee attacks. Anyone who goes in and whacks them with their weapon. Really good. Anytime you see element and then protection, in this case Holy, it cuts the damage by half that you receive. If you see immunity, then it cuts the damage completely, and it blocks the status effect attached to the element. In case of death, it'd be curse. In the case of fire, it'd be burn. Stuff like that. They all have their own statuses. If you have complete immunity, you can't be statused, and you take no damage. If he gets the gold medal, good luck. With trying to get a militia leveled up, it's impossible, pretty much. But if by some small miracle he lasts long enough to get the gold medal, his holy protection turns into holy immunity. Holy protection or immunity, either one, are pretty useless. Very few units get holy attacks. The Archons are the one race that have multiple units to get holy attacks. Other than that, I think one of the dragons does, and maybe one of the Siron units does, but that's really it. There's not very many holy attacks. And if there's not a lot of holy attacks, there's not a lot of use for holy immunity. So it's one of the worst elements to defend against. There's just not much point. So yeah, militia kind of sucks. Legionary, like I said, all he really gets that's good is throw spear. He also gets immunity eventually. Block lets him block the first attack that comes his way pretty much all the time. I think it is a enhancement. Yeah, there we go. Adds +5 defense when facing any physical ranged attack or the first enemy melee attack. So for all archery attacks or magic ranged attacks or any of that, he gets permanent... actually, I guess it wouldn't work for magic. It's only defense. So against like archery and throwing spear and cannon attacks and boulders and rocks and stuff like that, anything that can be thrown that counts as physical, he gets permanent +5 defense, which is a ton. That puts his defense at 12. That's a level 3 unit worth of defense. 12 defense. So his defense jumps up to effectively a level 3 unit against ranged attackers that use physical attacks. That's pretty specific. Mainly that's going to be archers. But siege weapons would count. Most of the siege weapons. Fire pistol, shoot javelin, any of that stuff would count. The trolls when they throw boulders, or the halflings when they throw rocks, all that would count, but it's still fairly rare. But yeah, blocking ranged physical attacks is really good at. It also works for the first melee attack. If they have full action points, any melee unit's going to get 3 attacks per round. They're going to attack 3 times. So he only gets the block bonus for that first attack per round. But still, it's good. It skyrockets his defense for that one attack. Not a bad ability to have. The only other thing he gets is protection and immunity. I already went over it. Archery, I just went over it. Marksman, I went over it. Each marksman point gives him 1 attack, 1 damage for archery. He also gets immunity to Holy. Level 2 units are a step up. They cost more upkeep. That's really what makes the difference between the units, other than how good they are. It's their upkeep. The base upkeep is 6 for the level 1 units. It's not really that bad, but they're not worth 6 upkeep for the most part. Unless you're just at the very beginning of the game and you have no choice. They're not really worth it. They're pretty crap. Some of the level 2 are worth the upkeep. In this case, 9 upkeep. This one is one of them. The Paladin is actually a really good cavalry unit. He doesn't really compare to the level 3 cavalry in the game, but that makes sense. He's a level below them. Plus he costs less upkeep, so it wouldn't make sense if he was as good as they were. But yeah, for level 2 cavalry, he's really good. He gets an elemental strike, which means on top of his damage, he gets another 50% based on holy. Eventually, he probably gets, he gets holy immunity eventually. He gets charge, which means on his first attack, if he moved at all, he gets bonus damage. Trucing, it's crap. Mounted just means he's on a mount. For the purposes of the game, if someone tries to control an animal versus him, they can basically use a control spell on him because he has a horse, because he is part animal. In theory, that's the way the game works. Anytime they're riding a mount like that, then control animal can affect them. This is our first weakness we've seen. Weakness works just like protection, except in reverse. Instead of them receiving half damage, they get 50% more damage that they receive. So it's a bad thing. In this case, it's for death attacks. Death is the opposite of holy as far as the elements go. So it makes sense that the Archons, who are holy, don't like death. Turn undead lets them fear undead. It's so-so. If I remember right, it doesn't do any damage, but I don't use the ability much, so don't quote me on that. Let's see. Turn undead. Yeah, it doesn't do any damage. It just panics them. It makes them run. If they're standing right next to you, you will get a free attack. Anytime a unit moves away from a unit, you get a free attack, like attack of opportunity, like in D&D. Basically, it's the same idea. If they're next to you and they move away, you get a free attack. So this could do some damage in theory, but it's just a so-so ability. It's not really that great. Plus, undead are only one race in the game, so this is a very, very specific ability. What else does he get? Magical Mount, that removes the possibility that his mount can be controlled. Basically, this stops mattering. Holy Champion, it's actually a really good buff, one of the best in the game, but much like Turn Undead, it only works against a specific set of enemies. In this case, evil enemies. If you're fighting orcs, dark elves, goblins, undead, or shadow demons, then this comes into play. It gives this unit plus 3 attack, plus 3 damage, which is a lot. Like I said, it's one of the best buffs in the game. That would put him easily in level 3 offensive stats. It put him at, what is that, 14? No, sorry, 12. It put him at 12, 10. Actually, it's a little low for level 3, but not unheard of. Still, it gives him a huge buff for his offensive move, his Holy Strike. So yeah, Holy Champion is good. There's the reverse. There's Unholy Champion, or it's called something like that. It does the same thing, but it's for evil champions when they're fighting good. So it's the other way around. Same stat bonuses. Avenger, I used to hate everything but archery for ranged attacks, but some of these ones actually turn out fairly decent. In this case, it's Holy Bolts. Holy Bolts is also affected by marksmanship. I'm pretty sure it's also 8-4, just like archery is. Yeah, it's 8-4. It's the same attack and damage as archery. But with marksmanship 2, it would go up to 10-6. 10 attack, 6 damage, which is respectable for fighting other level 2s. It's not going to really cut it against level 3s and most assuredly not level 4s. You're never going to hit a level 4 with that. But it makes him a decent ranged unit for level 2. So. He starts out with Holy Immunity. Like I said, it's of dubious value. True Seeing is garbage. It's very, very specific. Willpower. Willpower means that the unit cannot be controlled in any way, which means seduce or dominate or possess or a bunch of other stuff that lets you take control of units. As long as they have willpower intact, they can't be controlled. The problem with that is, if you're playing against the computer, they almost never use control spells. The ones I just listed, they almost never use them. Basically, the game has to start them out with a unit that has it for them to ever use it. They don't seem to produce them. Sorry, I had to take a drink. They don't seem to produce them, so it's really not that big a deal. Unless you're playing like actual players, real people, it's really not that big a deal. Turn Undead, already went into it. Very situational. Holy Champion again, Marksman for his Holy Bolts. He's a so-so unit. I mean, like I said, he's not going to fight anything above his level 2, at least not effectively. And really all he is a ranged unit. If you try to get him in melee combat, his stats are going to fail him for the most part. So, yeah, he's okay. Not great, not bad. Let's see, level 3. Pegasus Rider, she's somewhere in the middle as far as the mounted cavalry go. Probably the best would be the Flyer. I'm pretty sure he has the highest base stats. In fact, I can almost guarantee it. And he also has an elemental strike to go with it, which is really all you need. In fact, he's very similar to the Pegasus Rider, actually. The only difference is his stats are higher, I'm pretty sure. Actually, let's go ahead and check. We'll do a little matchup. We'll do our first matchup. Units. Draconians. Flyer. Okay, so we got 13, 9, 16. 1 less attack, 1 less health. 8, 8, 40. Wow, okay, so he's just straight up better in the stats category. He beats her in attack, in damage, in resistance, and in health. So purely based on stats, he wins. Let's check out the abilities. Holy Strike versus, I'm pretty sure it's Magic. Yeah, Magic Strike. Pretty sure they both get Vision. Yeah, they both have Vision too. So that's exactly the same. Do they both have Charge? They should, yeah. They both have Charge. They both have Flying, that's obvious. Really the only difference here is the Flyer gets Shadow Walker and Cold Weakness. Shadow Walker means the game is separated into 3 planes, if you will. There's the terrain, or the terrain, the earth, the land. That's what you're mostly on. You can go below ground to go into the underground. That's the second plane. And then you can go through portals to go to the Shadow World. If you don't have Shadow Walker, all of your stats are immediately cut in half when you go to the Shadow World. You have to have Shadow Walker to go to the Shadow World if you want to survive, if you want to be useful at all. So he automatically starts with that. It's not really that great of an ability on a unit because anyone can cast the buff to give their unit that ability in-game. It just costs a little bit of mana upkeep. So it's not that great of an ability to have on a unit. It's pretty superficial. Cold Weakness means anytime he gets hit by a cold attack, he takes bonus damage, just like the Death Weakness that the Archon has. It's the same thing, just a different element. Cold is fairly rare, whereas Death attacks are not. Death attacks are really common. In fact, I'd say Death is the most common. Magic is either the most common or second. It's between Death and Magic. Fire is very common. Cold is probably somewhere in the middle. Holy is very rare. Poison is very rare. I think that's all of them. So as far as immunities and protections go, it goes in order like Death and Magic are the 2 best to have, and then Fire would be next. So Cold is somewhere in the middle. It's not crazy rare, but it's not really common. Pretty much all the Frostling race has it. Frost Drake has it. Who else? I can't remember, but I think one of the Elementals has it. So there's a few. Not a lot, but a few. Let's see. So it's Shadow Walker and Cold Weakness and the stats versus Holy Immunity and Magical Mount. Yeah, it's really obvious who wins there. The base stats beat those 2 abilities easily. 4 more base stats are way better than Holy Immunity and Magical Mount. Far and away better. They're not even close. So yeah, the Flyer is definitely better of the 2 out of that matchup. Plus he looks badass too. He's like this dragon dude with a sword flying around, kicking the crap out of people. But yeah, just his stat distribution is just so much better. That doesn't mean she's bad. She's still fairly close to him. If you want to break it down, he definitely wins, but they're still fairly close. She's not a bad unit. Charioteer, probably the best ranged unit in the entire game. He can also brawl too. He has a melee attack. Most ranged units do not have a melee attack. If they get into melee range, they just get hit. They don't get to retaliate at all, which is huge. It's really big. You get no damage in return. They get free damage on you. The Charioteer is not like that. Not only does he have a melee attack, but he has really respectable stats too, to go with his archery and his marksmanship 3. He's just an insanely good unit, period, all around. Has no weakness. Easily the best ranged unit. I mean, there's a couple that come close, but I wouldn't say that there's any kind of competition. I mean, the other ones are definitely good, but Charioteer is definitely the best. 13 attack, 9 damage is respectable for level 3. Not great by any means, but melee attack isn't his primary form of damage. Archery is. This is like his backup form of damage, so that's very respectable. 11 defense is around about average. His resist is a little bit low, and his health is literally right at average. Somewhere around 20 is about average for level 3 health total. So yeah, really the only thing he's missing is his damage is a little bit low, and his resist are a little bit low. But on top of his regular stats and his ability to melee, he also gets archery and marksmanship 3, which puts his archery at 11 attack and 7 damage. Very, very respectable. That's probably not going to hit most of the tougher level 3 units, and definitely not going to do much to level 4. But for, you know, all the mediocre level 3 units and everything below that, he can hit them pretty reliably. Plus he has his melee attack to fall back on, and he eventually gets a strike for his melee attack, in this case Holy Strike, so his damage goes up even higher. You have to, anytime you see an elemental strike, the damage stat isn't the entire picture. You have to add in the elemental strike to the damage. So in this case, it'd be like 14 damage or so-ish, something like that. Assuming he gets full damage in. He gets a full damage roll. So yeah, he's got good melee, he's got good ranged. He's got the abilities to back them up, in this case, Holy Strike. Marksmanship 3. He's even got Charge for the hell of it. Charge is a pretty mediocre ability overall. Whenever you first attack something, you get bonus, what is it, bonus damage, I think? Hold up, go back. It might be attack. I can't remember if it's damage or attack. One of the two. Units, abilities. Actually, it should be an enhancement. Yeah, there it is. It is +2 damage on their first melee attack when attacking. Okay. Right, yeah, so the first swing they make, like I said, if they've got full action points, they're going to get 3 swings. The first one gets +2 damage. It's one of the weaker offensive abilities in the game, but it's not useless. It's just not great. So yeah, it's okay. It's not going to make a unit great all on its own, that's for damn sure. Other abilities, walking. I don't know why he has walking. He's definitely mounted. That's weird. That must have been a typo. Or maybe it's just they're either walking or they're flying. Maybe that's it. One of the two. Anyways, all it means is he's on the ground. Flying means they're in the air. So yeah, it's the only real difference. I think that's it for his abilities. He gets holy immunity again. Holy immunity again. Like I said, one of the worst immunities to have. But still, he's an amazing unit. I don't think any of the other ranged units in the game, regardless of their tier, can really compete with him. He's just that good. The Saint, he's basically there for Resurrect. To my knowledge, he's the only unit in the game that gets it. You can get the spell where your wizard can cast it, your avatar can cast it, but as far as units, I think he's the only one that gets it. In fact, I'm 99% sure he is. What it does is, when something dies, their body falls to the ground on the map, on the battle map, and then if your Saint can move up to them, he can bring them back to life. You can only ever bring a unit back to life once. Once you bring it back to life, it gets a debuff on it permanently, and every time you try to recast it on them, if they've died or whatever, the debuff blocks it. So you can only cast it per unit once, but you can cast it on multiple units, if that makes sense. There's an evil version of this called Animate Corpse or something like that. Effectively, it does the same thing. It's just the debuff and the spell itself have a different name. They do the exact same thing. They bring a unit back one time. Healing is once per battle you get to heal a unit. It really shouldn't have been once per battle. I don't know why the designers did it that way. It doesn't make any sense. It's not any more powerful than doing damage, in case you were wondering. In most cases, it's much worse. Healing is going to do about 5 to 10 healing. The max damage you can do in the game is well over 20. You can probably almost hit 30 damage. So even if you could cast this once every single turn, it wouldn't be that big a deal. It wouldn't be broken. But seeing as you can only cast it once per battle, it's basically useless. For all intents and purposes, it's got very, very little effect. Resurrect you can only cast once a battle as well, but it brings something back to life. Something that would have been dead permanently. So it has an actual purpose. Healing, not so much. He also has Death Weakness, which means if he gets hit by death attacks, it's gonna hurt. His health is really terrible. His defense is below average for a level 3 unit. Doesn't have attacking stats. Basically, he's just there for Resurrect. I don't really think he's worth it. I never use the Saint. That's way too much upkeep cost for something that can Resurrect once a fight. It's just not worth it. Their level 4 is the Titan. He's not the best of the bruiser level 4s. In fact, most of the level 4s are bruisers. They're big, bulky, meaty melee attackers that wade in and do a lot of damage. There's at least 3 other ones that are better than him. He's not a bad unit. It's just, if you've got all the races, there's no point in making him anymore. Because there's so many of them that are better than he is at what he does. But breaking him down, he's got pretty average stats for level 4. Their attack is usually around 15. Their damage is usually around 13-ish. Defense around 15. Resists around 10. Health around 30. So yeah, he's got very average stats for level 4. He's got Holy Strike to boost his damage. Plenty of level 4s have multiple elemental strikes, which means they get double the bonus elemental damage. He doesn't. He just has 1. He gets Holy Immunity eventually. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. Fire immunity is very good. That is very handy to have. It means he can't be burned. Also means all those fire attacks in the game, like red dragons breathing fire on him, won't do anything. Round attack is once per battle. It does an area attack around him. It uses his attack and damage stats, so in this case 15 and 12. It's a so-so ability. If you could use it multiple times per fight, it'd be much better. But once per fight, eh. And to get the full amount of attacks, which would be 4, you'd have to have literally people on all 4 sides of you. It's very rare. Usually you're only going to hit maybe 2 people with it. He also gets vision. Vision, whenever you're walking on the world map, it lets you see farther out. The circle around you is wider that you get to get vision of. In this case, he's so damn tall that he gets vision 1 because he's a giant. Willpower, like I said, it's mostly useless versus the computer. Wall crushing means whenever he hits any kind of fortification, like a door or a wall or whatever, he breaks it down twice as fast. So whenever you're in a siege trying to break into a castle, he does it twice as fast. And then, like I said, he gets holy immunity. Overall, he's not a bad ultimate unit. It's just there's other ones that serve the exact same purpose but do it better. That's the problem with the Titan. I'll go into them when I get to them. So that's it for Archons. As far as their best units, probably either the Paladin is pretty good for level 2 for what he is. You know, he's a pretty cheap little cavalry unit with tons of movement and, you know, an elemental strike. He's okay. The unequivocal best for Archon is Charioteer because it's the best range unit in the game. And then their level 4 is okay. So they've got 2 that are okay and 1 really good. Actually, I'd say the Pegasus Rider is pretty good for an air unit. She's probably 3rd best for flying cavalry in the game, somewhere around there. Elves units are mostly crap, not gonna lie. The race literally could not be in the game, and it wouldn't be any worse for wear. They've only got really 1 unit out of all of their roster that serves any real purpose. Their level 1 units are terrible, all of them. The Nymph is a piece of crap. Seduce is its claim to fame. It's a control move, but its attack is so low that it's not going to hit anything worth seducing. And if I remember right, it's only once per battle too. But even if it wasn't, its attack is just so low. Let's see, go back to combat abilities. Seduce. Yeah, it's once per battle. They call it once per day, but it's once per battle. For the most part. But yeah, 8 attack is terrible. Anything below 10 attack is pretty bad. But 8 attack is just, you're never going to hit. You're never going to hit a level 4 unit unless you get just disgustingly lucky. You're almost never going to hit a level 3 unit. And that takes out all the good units in the game, for the most part. There's very, very few that Seduce is actually going to connect with. So, and that's all the Nymph gets, is Seduce. The rest of her kit is crap, her stats are crap, it's just Seduce. So yeah, she's garbage. Scout is one of the worst cavalry in the entire game. Druid is really specialized in that he can control animals. If they don't have willpower, or magical mount or whatever, you can technically control them and fuck over 1 unit. It's not really that big a deal. His stats are kind of blah for a level 3. Yeah, they're pretty low. Wow, they're really low for a level 3. And really all he has is control. Entangle is a piece of crap. It's melee range. He has to walk up to them in melee range to use it, and all it does is root them in place for, I think it's like 1 turn or something like that. It's pretty crap. So yeah, the Druid's garbage. Iron Maiden is the one I said where she, the only elf unit that actually has a purpose, in that she makes decent cavalry, not the best in the game, but decent. She has an elemental strike to supplement her damage. She has charge just like every other cavalry. What makes her special is phase. Phase is an interesting move where if you use it, you can teleport to anywhere on the battle map 1 time. You can use it once per battle. So basically it's a free teleport wherever you want to go. After you've teleported, you can get 1 attack in. You only have enough action points for 1. Remember, normally every unit gets 3 attacks. As long as they're not using a special ability. If they're using their melee attack or archery or something like that, they always get 3 attacks per turn. After you phase, you only get 1, which really isn't much. Then, assuming you phase to somewhere relatively dangerous, you know, anywhere you'd want to phase to, their whole team gets free attacks on you next turn. So phase is very, very situational. But at the very least, it's noteworthy. She's the only cavalry, hell, she's one of the only decent fighting units that gets phased in the entire game. Most of them are really awkward units that you shouldn't be doing melee with anyways. They get phased. She's like she's like an infiltrator or an ambusher or something. That's her claim to fame. The rest of her set isn't bad. Like I said, she's decent cavalry. She gets Elemental Strike, she gets Holy Champion eventually. Magical Mount and Willpower, she can't be controlled at all. Charge, but all cavalry get that. But really, it's just phase that makes her special. So yeah, probably the only elf unit I'd ever see any point in using. The tree is terrible. His stats are just stock average for this level. Actually, his health's a little higher, but that's really it. His stats are really average, and his abilities are, for the most part, crap. Plus, he has fire weakness. Like I said, that's like third most common attack in the entire game. That's bad. Poison immunity is a decent immunity, but it's one of the more rare attacks. The only reason it's decent is because the debuff attached to poison is the strongest in the game. So that's the only reason it's even a good immunity. But fire weakness is just so much worse. And his abilities are just bleh. They're just not good. Regeneration is very situational. Assuming you get any spells at all, you're going to have out-of-combat healing once you're back on the world map. So regeneration is very iffy. I don't see the point in it most of the time. And then wall crushing is okay, but he has no elemental strike. He has no offensive abilities at all of any kind, and his stats are average, so he's kind of crap. Fairy Dragon would be a decent ultimate unit if it wasn't a copy, basically, of the Red Dragon, but worse in every way. I'll go ahead and do the matchup just to show you a direct comparison. I'm already on Draconians. Very good. So this is the Red Dragon. Look at the stat difference. 2 attack, same defense, 3 more health. The Fairy Dragon gets 1 more damage, and 2 more resists. The problem with that is the attack is more important. If you can't hit, you can't do damage. And in this game, whenever an ultimate unit is colliding with another one, hitting is all that matters. Because that's how you get your secondary abilities to activate, to happen. Like Energy Drain, or Cause Fear, or your bonus damage from your Elemental Strike, all that stuff. If you can't hit them, none of that stuff happens. So attack is infinitely more important than damage. So much so that, in some cases, 1 attack is more important than 3 damage. That's the difference. So his 2 attack over the Fairy Dragon is huge. Cannot be underestimated. He also has more health. The Fairy Dragon has more resists. That is easily the least important stat in the game. It only comes into play very rarely with units and with the enemy wizards. Some units will check against resist, but when an enemy wizard uses a spell on you, it always checks against resist. The problem is, very rarely are you getting hit with spells. Very, very rarely. So much so that it's probably like 1 in 50 compared to, you know, physical attacks. Things that are checked against defense. Very, very rarely. So resist is much less important. Taking that into account, it's 2 attack and 3 health versus 1 damage. It's just not even at all. The base stats for the Red Dragon are just better. That's not even getting into the abilities. Fire Breath is unequivocally better than Pixie Dust. They function the same. They're both a breath attack that hits an area in front of them, and they add status effects. The difference is, Fire Breath, you know what it's going to add. It's always going to add Burn, and Burn is a very good status effect. Pixie Dust is completely random. You have no idea what it's going to do at all in any given situation, or if it's going to do anything at all. So yeah, I like the guaranteed burn from Fire Breath much more than I like Pixie Dust. Barring that, Red Dragon gets Cause Fear. Arguably the best offensive ability in the game. At the very least, it's one of the best. Fairy Dragon doesn't get it at all, which is a huge detriment. Cannot be underestimated how huge a detriment that is. But yeah, those are the 2 biggest differences. Fire Breath versus Pixie, and Cause Fear versus nothing for the Fairy Dragon, and the base stats. But breaking down the rest of their abilities, Fairy Dragon gets Flying, which means it gets to pick its targets. Anything that's flying can attack ground units whenever it wants to, but ground units can't attack it, at least not without a ranged attack, like archery or something like that. A lot of the times you'll have a flying unit and they just won't, and you'll single out their units and just go through their entire army. I've done that tons of times. Like, let's say I have a Red Dragon and they have, I don't know, 5 Warlords or something. You know, some ground unit that can't attack air. their number advantage doesn't matter anymore because you're a flying unit. That's the way flying works. You can pick one of their targets, you attack them, they get to retaliate, so it's basically a one-on-one fight, and all the rest of them just have to sit there and wait their turn. So yeah, flying is a big advantage in this game. Dragon ability, or in this case it's just a status, all it really affects is if you fight knights, the human unit knight, like, you know, knight in shining armor, they get a bonus to attack when they hit you. That's it. That's all that matters. That's all it means. Magic protection, half damage from magic. One of the most common elemental types, like I said, it's death and magic. One of those two is the most common. So it's a good protection. It'd be better if it was an immunity, but it looks like it never even turns into immunity for this unit, which kind of sucks. But it's better than nothing. Magic strike, elemental strike for when he goes in for melee. Phase, it's completely useless on the fairy dragon. Like I said, all it does is let you teleport around. The fairy dragon has 40 movement and flying, so it's not affected by terrain or other units in its way. It's going to move half the distance across the map per turn. So phase is mostly useless on this unit. You're never going to use it. Plus it's going to eat up your action points too. If you do use it, you're only going to get one attack instead of 3. So yeah, it's kind of garbage on this unit. Vision 2, because it's a flyer, looks like it goes all the way up to Vision 4, which is, I'm pretty sure, the highest. I don't think it goes any higher than that. All that means is on the world map, if you get that high, if you get to Vision 4, and you move this fairy dragon around, it's going to have huge amounts of vision on the world map. It's going to see a massive area. That's all it really means. True Seeing, like I said, very situational. Willpower, very situational. Pixie Dust is a crappy version of Fire Breath. So the only thing special the fairy dragon gets over the red dragon is phase. That's really it. Because, yeah, they get the same level of marksman, same level of vision. They both get willpower. They're both dragons. They both get vision. They both get magic strike. They're both flying. The only thing the fairy dragon gets that the red dragon doesn't get is phase. And like I said, that's of dubious value. Whereas the red dragon gets fire immunity, really strong. Means you can't get burned, like I said, and you're immune to all fire attacks. Really, really good. He gets, what else? Shadow Walker, which means you don't have to buff him with it. Cause Fear, which is huge. He also gets Cold Weakness. Cold is much less common than fire, so having fire immunity more than makes up for cold weakness. And plus, most of the things that get cold attack are ground-based. I can't think of a single one that's air-based, which means you'd have to choose to attack them as the red dragon for this to even come into play, because you're a flyer. The only thing I can think of that would hit the dragon of its own accord and does cold damage is like one of the cannons, the frost cannon, but the computer never builds them, ever. I've never seen them ever build one, and I've played this game ludicrous amounts of times, so it doesn't really come into play. So yeah, better base stats, in my opinion. Someone could argue that damage is better than attack, but they're idiots. It's wrong. Attack is so much better. Better stats, Cause Fear, Fire Immunity, Fire Breath, so much better. They seem like little things, but they're not little things. The red dragon is just way better than the fairy dragon, which means that, again, the fairy dragon is not a bad unit, but if you have the capability to build both, you'd never build the fairy dragon. You'd always build the red dragon, you know? So it means that it becomes completely useless once you have red dragons, is what it means. So yeah, that's all the elf units. Like I said, Iron Maiden's probably the only one I'd ever use, and even then, I don't really buy into phase being that useful. It's very situational. Iron Maiden can stand on her own as just a unit without phase, without even taking phase into account. She's a decent cavalry, but as far as what makes her special, it doesn't really come into use much. At least not for me. The rest of the elf units are kind of crap. Their ultimate unit is only slightly worse than the red dragon, but it is worse. The rest of their units are kind of crap. Dwarves. They have one of the better fighting units at level 1, the Berserker, only because he gets double strike. Like I said, per turn, if you have max action points, you're going to get 3 swings. With double strike, you get twice that, 6, which is a lot of attacks. A lot of attacks, a lot of potential damage. It's just a really good offensive ability. You put that on a level 1 unit, which is pretty much non-existent in this game, other than this one guy, and it means he has a lot of damage potential for a level 1. You can basically effectively double his damage. He doesn't really get anything else to back that up. I mean, eventually he gets poison immunity, but he's not going to last long enough for that to matter. 5 defense, 13 health. He's basically a suicide kamikaze, melee attacker. That's his purpose. But he does do it well. Assuming you get into like level 1 fights or something at the very beginning of the game, the Berserker is going to come out on top a lot of the time. Plus he looks badass too. He's got his big ass red beard and he's a dwarf with a mohawk and double bladed axes, and he's just cool as hell looking. But yeah, pretty good for a level 1 unit. Crossbowmen, there are 2 in the game. The dwarf get 1 and the human get 1. They are the best level 1 ranged units for defending things because they get fire crossbow ability, which is, versus tougher units, infinitely better than archery. Its base attack is huge. It's like 16, and then its base damage is like 8 or something like that. Fire crossbow. Oops. Sorry, 16-7. I was very close. What that means is it gets double the attack as archery would, which means even if you're fighting like level 3 units, even in Ultimate, one of the level 4 units, you still have a decent chance of hitting them. Whereas archery, without massive amounts of marksman, even then, it's still going to have less attack than this. But yeah, it's a really good defensive unit. Regardless of what's attacking your town, fire crossbow will get the job done. Will do damage to them. That kind of thing. So for defending things, as far as like living units, not siege weapons, crossbowmen are by far the best. As far as the dwarf versus the human, they're exactly the same. They have slightly different abilities, none of it comes into play. Probably slightly different stats, none of it comes into play. All that matters is they both get marksman 2 and fire crossbow. That's it. Because like I said, all I use him for is defending things. Boar rider, he's a piece of crap. Doesn't get an elemental strike, doesn't get any special abilities. His stats are stock average. He's crap. Engineer is very specialized. The idea behind him is you can bring siege weapons with you and bring an engineer and he'll be there to keep them repaired, that kind of thing. Plus he gets fire pistol and marksmanship. Marksmanship 2 plus fire pistol actually isn't that bad. It gives him something to do in between fiddling with your siege weapons. He also has sabotage, which means in theory if you can get him inside of fortifications, he can instantly blow up or do a lot of damage to siege weapons. But in practice, on paper, he's really just a crappy ranged unit. That's really all there is to it. I mean, effectively he's about as good as a crossbowman. Except he costs more. And his upkeep is higher. Really the only difference between him and a crossbowman is he gets to repair machines, which I think is once per fight, I believe. Yeah, once per fight. For 5 to 10 health. Basically, he gets the heal spell, but for machines. It's crap. And his other ability, Sabotage, is just too damn hard to use. I mean, like I said, you have to get through their entire line of units. And if it's a fortification, which is pretty much the only time you're going to see a siege weapon, you also have to get through their gates. So through their gates, through the choke point, through all their units, and then get to their siege weapons. Look at this guy's stats. That's not going to happen. You're never going to use Sabotage. So all he is a crappy crossbowman. I mean, honestly, that's really what fire pistol is. It's basically the same thing as fire crossbow. Let's see. Fire crossbow 16-7. Yeah, it's got 1 more damage. It's only 1 shot a turn. It's not like archery or physical attacks where you get 3. It's only 1. So it's literally 1 damage difference. That's not worth the upkeep cost. I'm sorry. It's just not. I mean, you could get 3 crossbowmen for the cost of 2 of these. That's easily more efficient. It's not even close. So yeah, the engineer's kind of crap. The mole, again, he was supposed to be very specialized to underground. He does decent underground because for a level 3 he has okay stats. I mean, he's right at average for health. His resistance is a little low, his damage is a little low, his attack and his defense are a little high. Just a little bit higher. So overall, he's probably about average as far as stats go. When you put him underground, he automatically gets cave crawling, so he has no penalty for being underground. And he can tunnel through walls. I don't use tunneling much because I just don't see the point for the most part. But he doesn't get an elemental strike, doesn't get any offensive abilities at all of any kind. He's just lackluster. Even underground in his element, he's still lackluster. Plus, you can give any unit in the game cave crawling just from a spell, just from casting a spell, so that really doesn't matter. Really crappy unit. Rune Master he's decent for a level 3 brawler, someone who just, is semi-tanky, gets up there and whacks them in the face. There's a lot of those in this game. For a level 3 one, he's okay. He's not the best by any stretch of the imagination. He gets an elemental strike to supplement his damage. He gets, for the most part, higher than average stats. He gets, what else does he get? He gets leadership, but leadership without bard skills, in my opinion, is just stupid. I wouldn't use him for that. What else does he get? Tunneling, I already said, I never use it. It's just not worth it. Night vision is fucking stupid. Poison immunity, he's immune to the worst debuff in the game. Or I guess the best debuff in the game, depending on how you're looking at it. So that's kind of good. Wall crushing, situational, but good. He also gets magic immunity, so he gets poison. He gets dual immunity, magic and poison. Magic being one of the common ones, and poison being the biggest pain in the ass debuff. So yeah, he's not a bad unit. I wouldn't say he's the best brawler. I wouldn't say he's in the best brawler for level 3. There's definitely better ones, but he's up there. He's pretty good. Dual immunity, fire strike. Oh crap, he gets triple immunity. He gets fire, poison, and magic immunity eventually. Wow. That's a lot of good immunities right there. And his stats are slightly above average, and he gets an elemental strike. So he's not fancy, but he is a great unit, actually. Now that I think about it. Yeah, he's not getting like dual elemental strikes or double strike or life steal or any of those really fancy cool abilities. But when you break it all down, he's immune to a lot of stuff, he's got above average stats, he's got elemental strike, and that's really all you need, honestly. So yeah, he's a good unit. Rune Master is a good unit. Yeah. I still wouldn't say he's the best for level 3, but he's up there. He's better than I thought he was. Triple immunities is pretty much unheard of. There's only a very few enemies in the game that get more than 2. Actually, most don't even get 1 if you want to break it down. Very few that get 2. Very, very few that get more than 2. So yeah, that's pretty good. Gargoyle is another example of one that gets lots of immunities, but in this case, that's what makes him special. And it's really the only thing that makes him special. He's immune to pretty much everything. Let's see if he is immune to everything. Magic, cold, fire, death, holy, poison. Yeah, he's immune to everything. Every spell type in the game, which means you can't debuff him. All the elemental strikes in the game are useless against him, so you don't get your bonus damage. Which, on paper, sounds really strong, right? He does not have level 3 stats. That's the problem. I mean, look at the stat difference. These are both level 3 units. Look at the massive stat difference. His stats are terrible. Other units are just going to outright beat you because of their stats, regardless of if you're immune to elements. Because your stats are so horrible. They are horrendous. He is technically flying. He does have an elemental strike, but pretty much all level 3 units have an elemental strike. That's not special. Really, the only thing that's special about him is he's flying and he has the immunities. Being flying means he can choose his fights. The problem with that is, even if you are choosing your fights, you're never going to get in a fight with something that's worth killing, because it will kill you. Because your stats are so bad. he can't 1v1 any other level 3 unit, at least not the one that I can think of. I can't think of a single one where he can 1v1 and win, because his stats are just too bad. And his only offensive ability is an elemental strike, that's it. So yeah, even though he gets all these elemental immunities and it sounds cool on paper, he's a crap unit, period. He's garbage. Steam Tank, it's one of 4 transports in the game. The way transports work is, if they're in a group with other units, the other units in that group immediately get the movement of the transport, in this case 32. So if I had 7 level 1 units in the same group as a Steam Tank, they all get 32 movement, instead of whatever they'd normally get, like 20 or something like that. All it means is on the world map, your entire group takes the movement of the transport, which should make them, in theory, cross terrain faster. In combat, he has Fire Cannon, which is the hardest hitting ranged attack in the game. The stats on it are pretty ludicrous. I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll go ahead and look it up. 18-15. So, 18 attack, 15 damage. That is insane. That's like level 4 damage. Like a level 4 unit damage on like a brawler or something like that. But it's on a transport. Of course, it's only 1 shot per round, whereas a brawler would get 3 attacks per round, ideally if they have max action points. So it's not really the same, but it's still a really hard-hitting, really high attack move. Which means, even though this is fundamentally a transport, that's its purpose, it can still hit really damn hard per turn. Its other abilities, it has What is that? Cold protection. I don't know why it has that, but whatever. It has marksman for fire cannon. Looks like he goes to marksman 3. Damn! That's going to put it at 21 attack, 18 damage. Wow. So it's never going to miss. At marksman 3, I mean, you'd have to have the worst attack roll ever to miss pretty much anything in the entire game. And its damage is crazy per shot. It's only got one shot, but that damage is crazy high. So yeah, fire cannon plus marksman 3, really beast. It's a transport. It gets poison immunity because it's a non-living thing. All non-living things get poison immunity by default. It has cave crawling for free, not that big a deal. Like I said, you can just cast it. Mountaineering means it can drive through mountains. Most ground units can't do that. They have to walk around mountains. Night vision, basically useless. Tunneling, again, I never use it. Steam is a unique attack to the steam tank. It does damage in an area around it, kind of like round attack. The difference is that this isn't once per day. You can use this as many times as you want, which is actually pretty damn cool. You can use the tank as a transport for weaker units, and then send the tank, when you get in a fight, send it out front, let it absorb a bunch of punishment, and just keep spamming steam when things surround it to do area damage. So yeah, it's very interesting, and it works really well, because the steam tank, even for a level 4, he has really good defensive stats. 35 is really high health, and 14 in both resist and defense is really respectable. So he takes hits really well. He has an area attack that can spam. And if he wants to do single target damage, he has fire cannon plus marksman 3. So even though he's a transport, he's a really good unit. In combat, he's still a really good unit. So yeah, the steam tank, really, really good. It's not my favorite transport in the game, solely because it doesn't have flying, and my favorite does. That's the only difference. That's the only reason the other one is my favorite. But the steam tank is still really, really good. So yeah, for dwarves, steam tank is really good. Rune Master is really good. I think that's probably it. Obviously the crossbowman. Berserk is pretty good, but for the most part, you're not going to use level 1 units in the field. The only time I use them is for castle defense, and that'd be crossbowman for the most part. So even though the Berserker's a good offensive unit for level 1, you're still not going to bring them around with you. They're not going to be a part of your army or anything like that. You're going to use them at the very, very beginning of the game when you can't build anything else, basically. So mainly it's crossbowman, rune master, and steam tank for the dwarves. Let's see, halflings. I used to hate the halflings, period. I've come to realize that they've got some pretty good units, ironically enough. Even though most of their units have really crappy stats, or at the very least worse stats than the other races, the comparable units for the other races, they've got some really good units, like the rogue, for example. Poison darts is probably the most generically awesome 3-hit ranged attack. Other ones would be sling, like hurl stone, this right here, or archery, or what else? Any of the element ones like holy bolts, death bolts, magic bolts, all that stuff. So for all those 3-shot ranged attacks, this is my favorite. Poison darts. Why? Because it's poison element. It's just, period. That's it. It's poison element. So he's got poison darts, and he's got marksmanship 3, which is only one step away from the best marksmanship in the game for a level 2 unit. He's just a really good ranged attacker. I was surprised. All of his stats don't matter, because all that matters is he has poison darts and marksmanship. These never come into play for the most part. You just keep him in the back and, chuck darts at people, and it works really well. I seriously underestimated this unit. I still wouldn't say he's better than the Charioteer, but that's not a fair comparison, because the Charioteer is level 3, this is level 2. For a level 2 ranged attacker, he might be one of the best. Hell, he might be the best in the game for level 2. So yeah, really good unit. Pony Rider, one of the worst cavalry in the game. The Sheriff, he's got a very specific purpose for the way I play. I always have, or at least I always try to have, one unit with leadership and bard skills per group. That way I don't have to worry about conflicts between the alignments. If you have bard skills, you can even have like good and evil units together, and they'll work together. And if you have leadership, in this case leadership 3 at max rank, they all get, I think it's +2 attack and +1 damage. The entire group. That's 8 different units. So that's a total for, what is that? 16 attack and 8 damage. That's huge, spread across the group. So leadership 3 is really good. In this case, it's on the sheriff. And I don't like him quite as much as the... I'll go ahead and do the matchup. Why not? I don't like him quite as much as the chieftain for the nomads. Only because the chieftain is a better fighter. If you get the chieftain in a fight, he's going to win. Like if you fight the sheriff against the chieftain, 9 times out of 10, the chieftain's going to win just because of his stats. Really the only thing the sheriff has is he has Smoky Haze and Fire Pistol along with marksmanship. So he's kind of like a pseudo ranged unit that's also a leader at the same time, which is kind of interesting. I don't see that working for me in practice, but it is interesting. But like I said, if you break down his stats, the sheriff just sucks. Let's see, 11, 10, 20. He's got a whopping 4 more attack. 4 more attack. That is a huge difference. That's like 2 level groups worth of attack difference. That's huge, man. I think the defense and the health are the same. He's got higher damage by 1. He's got higher resist by 2, and he's got higher movement. So all of his stats are better. Any stat that's different between them, his are better. The chieftain doesn't beat him in stats, or sorry, the sheriff doesn't beat him in stats in any way. And the attack is massive. That's a huge amount of attack. What that boils down to is if either one of these melee, the chieftain is the far and away better unit. But like I said, this one seems to be more based around ranged combat. You use Fire Pistol with Marksmanship 2 and you're going to be at like 10-9 or something like that. Is it 9? No, it's not 9. It's like 10... Is it 9? I can't remember. Something like that. It doesn't matter. It's somewhere around there. 10 attack, 8 damage, 9 damage, something like that. That's going to be enough to fight level 2 units. Not really level 3s. You're going to miss them a lot. And you only get 1 shot per round with Fire Pistol. So he's not going to be a great ranged unit. That's for damn sure. He's not going to hit anything worth hitting. The only thing that's else is special about him is Smoky Haze. When he gets in melee combat, if anything hits him, they have a chance to be poisoned. That's huge. That's a really good buff. The problem is, he doesn't really have the stats to back up being a melee unit. He's rarely going to hit anything with 11 attack, and his damage is nothing to write home about. It's only 1 less than the chieftain, but even the chieftain's damage is a little low for a level 3 unit. So yeah, combine the two, horrible attack with low damage. He doesn't make a great melee unit. He's not particularly tanky. 10 defense is pathetic for a level 3. His health is only at average, so yeah. Even though this is a good ability, trying to use this guy as a melee attacker would be just for Smoky Haze. You know, that'd be the only reason you'd do it, and he'd probably get killed. So, bottom line, I just don't like the sheriff as much as the chieftain. The chieftain can get in there and brawl with his really high attack. He can get in there and actually do damage. Assuming he needs to. I'm usually pretty careful with him because he's my leader. You know, he's the guy with leadership. I don't want him to die. But assuming I have to, I can get in there with him and actually hit things. With that high of an attack stat, he can even hit level 4 units fairly regularly. Because about the highest defense you see in the game is 16. I think there's 1 unit with 17. So 15 attack is really, really good. But yeah, I just like the chieftain better out of the two, if I had to pick. Definitely like the chieftain better. Sheriff looks cooler though. He's on a little pony and he's got his little pikeman thing and his red jacket on and all that. Definitely looks cool. Let's see, the rest of the dwarf, or sorry, halfling units. Eagle Rider's a piece of crap. Doesn't get elemental strike. Automatically sucks. That's all there is to it. Centaur, direct comparison would be the Charioteer. The differences are pretty substantial, but fundamentally they serve the same purpose. Even though they're very different, they're there for the same reason. They're there for level 3 archery. That's their thing, with high marksmanship. I think the Centaur beats him out. Yeah, Centaur gets maxed out marksmanship at 4, which means his archery ends up being 12 attack, 8 damage. That's borderline enough to hit level 4 units. You're still going to have trouble, but you're in that range where you can actually hit level 4 units with that much attack. And 8 damage is very respectable. That's 3 shots a round, too. So yeah, very respectable. Probably the best straight up just for range damage unit in the entire game. for ranged. Just because, 3 shots per round, 12 attack, 8 damage. Really good stuff. The reason the Charioteer is better is because the Charioteer can go into melee. And not only can he go into melee, but he can do it very well because of charge and holy strike and his stats and all that. He's also tankier too, which means if he does get hit, he's not going to die as fast. So yeah, I just like the Charioteer better. He's got 1 less marksmanship, but that's not enough to use the Centaur, in my opinion. And that's the only advantage the Centaur gets. Forestry means if you're walking through trees, you don't get a movement penalty. Without Forestry, you do. It doesn't come into play very often. It's really not that big a deal. Concealment means if you're walking through any kind of brush, you become invisible on the world map. Again, doesn't make that big of a difference. Hold up, my dog wants to go out. 1 sec.